So I said to two of the guys who worked for me, I'd done a team brief, and I said what I needed my team to do. And I asked two of them to stop back, and I said, I've got a big job for this. I said, oh, what is it? And I said, well, you're driving a camper van to one of them, and the other one, you're cycling next to me. I said, a camper van and a bike, where are we going? And I said, we're going to Land's End, and then we're going to John O'Groats. And I thought I was joking, and I wasn't.
The Inner Game Podcast. Brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Presented by Rob Hume, the leading elite athlete mental performance coach. Unleash your power.
Boom. So, welcome onto the Inner Game Podcast. We have with us today somebody called Gary Mckee. Gary Mckee is somebody who is right in the heat and right in the heart of taking on an unbelievable challenge, and he's become accustomed to taking on these challenges. I think in the last few years, he set himself the task and challenge of running 110 marathons in 110 days, which is obviously an unbelievable physical, mental, and emotional challenge. And right now, he's decided to up his game again and go multiple levels further. And he's currently undertaking his latest challenge, which is to run 365 marathons in 365 days. And currently, Gary is at day 140. And here we have Gary to come and talk about how he's got to this point, how on earth you're doing it, and to share some of the nuggets of wisdom that might help somebody do something even half, even 10% of what you've done. So thanks a lot for coming on, Gary.
No problem, mate.
So how did your journey into running begin for you? I'm guessing you didn't just start running marathons every day. What was it that sparked it for you?
I did start running marathons every day. I've never ever considered myself as a runner. I see myself as a fundraiser. So if we go back to where all that began, in 1997, I came home from work. It was the 23rd of June. I'd been to work. It was a Monday. It was a lovely day. It was nice and hot. And I got out the car, and my family was sitting outside. My mum was there, my sisters, and I could say that they were a little bit distressed. I didn't know why. I looked for my dad and he wasn't there. And I went down the path and I asked what was wrong, and I don't even know what the answer was. But I went into the house and my dad was sitting there in his usual chair, and he said to me the words that nobody ever wants to hear. And he said, I've got cancer. And it was like I'd been hit with a hammer. And I didn't know what to do or what to think of. If it was word association and we were using the word cancer, I would have followed up with death or suffering, because that's how you feel. And my dad had tears in his eyes, and I'd never seen him cry before. And I realised he was afraid. You get to a certain point in your life where your parents have always looked after you, and it becomes a bit of a role reversal. And I thought that's what had happened, and I wanted to look after my dad, but I didn't know how to. I felt numb. And as it turned out, my dad was a cancer survivor. He had lung cancer, that he had his lung removed, and he lived another 6 years. He's seen things that he'd had a second chance in life. He rolled up his sleeves. He didn't sweat the small stuff that most of us do. He was a fella who everybody had time for. You would never hear anybody say a bad word about my dad. He loved a pint. He went down to the local Legion and played dominoes. He used to help everybody. He was a bit of a pillar of the society, and he used to have fundraising events himself and raise money to send people to Lourdes who were really poorly. I remember when I was a child thinking that he had another family, because on Christmas Day he used to disappear. It wasn't until years later I found out he would go down to the old folks' home and dress up as Santa and give out presents and stuff, and he was always singing to the old folks. So my dad passed away on the 29th of April 2003 of an unrelated illness. And to be honest, it was like the felling of a giant oak. He left a gap in our lives, one that could never be replaced. Even when you bring other things into your life, it's not filling that gap. So I wanted to do something in his memory, and I became a fundraiser for MacMillan Cancer support. We didn't have the support from MacMillan because we didn't need it. My dad just got on with things, and I was just thinking about the people who were going to be told the same news that we'd been told on a cancer journey, and how they feel helpless and how support is out there for them. And I wanted to offer them that support by raising funds for MacMillan. So I signed up to do a cycle right across Brazil. And I'd never been into cycling either. And I'd never really been into geography because I didn't realise it was the fifth largest country in the world. It was at that point I realised I'd been spending too much time at school swinging on my chair. The teacher told me, "You'll never learn anything, McKay." And they were right at that point. But I done the cycle. It was around about 70 or 80 miles a day for a week or so. And it was, I learned a new word, undulating, and up and down, which I didn't know about at the time. There was a lot of like-minded people there for a reason. It was to help others. And I got the bug of being wanting to help more people because I raised around about £7,000. I realised that £50 bought a food blender for somebody with throat cancer. So all those £50 out of the 7,000 was that many. That's how many people you were reaching out to and helping. So I then got on my fundraising journey, as in I started doing bits of bobs of running about and doing stuff. I climbed Kilimanjaro the following year. I trekked through New Zealand, but then I came onto the internet and I seen somebody had ran from Land's End to John O'Groats in a daft time, and I thought, I can do that. But what I'll do is I'll walk it. I'll use the national paths and I'll go from Land's End to John O'Groats unsupported, and I'll do it over 2 months. I had plenty of time off work. I had loads of leave that I needed to use. So that's what I talked through with the wife, and she said, go for it if that's what you want to do. You'll raise lots of money, help lots of people, and you'll have a wonderful time seeing the country from one end to the other at your pace. So I went into work and somebody had booked some leave, which meant I had to cover it. So I only had a month to do it. So the choice was really made for me. If I can't walk it, I'll have to run it. And I was never a runner. I played rugby all my life, and forwards don't run that far on a rugby field. Certainly not miles, more metres than miles. So I said to two of the guys who worked for me, I'd done a team brief, and I said what I needed my team to do. And I asked two of them to stop back, and I said, I've got a big job for this. I said, oh, what is it? And I said, well, you're driving a camper van to one of them, and the other one, you're cycling next to me. I said, a camper van and a bike, where are we going? And I said, we're going to Land's End, and then we're going to John O'Groats. And I thought I was joking, and I wasn't. So I had to convince them to go home and tell the partners what we were doing. And they bought into it, so that's what we done. So one of the guys was a former long-distance lorry driver, and he'd done the maps. And the other one cycled next to me, and they took turns at swapping over. So I was averaging 32 miles a day. I'd say to the camper van driver, give me 10 miles. So he'd drive out 10 miles and he'd relay information back to the cyclist. Be careful at this roundabout, be careful at that. It's quite heavy traffic here. I'm on Tesco's car park. And then I'd get there and they had a cup of tea ready for me and maybe a sandwich, and them two would swap over, and then it went like that for a while, and it was absolutely fantastic. We raised about 25 grand. We were doing our own blog on the internet. I got a page set up and all that. People following us from all over the country, and all three of us had our perspective on the day. So it was the day of a runner, the day of a cyclist, and the day of a camper van driver. What they didn't tell me was that fair enough, they were all right at riding a bike and driving a camper van, but they couldn't cook. They couldn't boil an egg. They were absolutely useless. So I was running 32 miles a day and then making their tea. And they always found a place to stop, and it was usually a pub car park where we could hook up and they could go and get a pint. So I wasn't drinking because I was running 32 miles a day, but them two were half cut most of the time. It was a fantastic experience. And as I said, we raised lots of money and helped lots of people. And then I realised that I wasn't bad at running either. If you can string them sort of distances together, you must be doing something that's half right.
Yeah, definitely. So when you started running, those 32 miles, what was there literally no progression up from that?
Yeah, I've always been all right at running. I've got a decent engine, and I had a bit of, I live in the Lake District, so I'd done a lot of mountain walking and fell climbing and stuff like that. So I did build up. And what I used to do was I used to put back-to-back 30 milers together. So I'd maybe run 30 mile for 4 rest days that I was off work. And then I'd do stuff in between. And then on the weekend, when I had more rest, I'd do another couple of 30 milers and put them together and see what my legs felt like. And it was a bit of trial and error, because it's difficult to get into. It was 2011, so I didn't have the contacts, or I didn't really have people who I knew who could say, what do I do here, what do I do there? And it was more, everything was on my terms with regards to running. So when we were up in Scotland, we'd often see people fishing, and we'd just stop on a bridge and watch them, and you'd listen to the bird song and stuff like that. So it was never a race as such. It was just completing the 30 miles a day. I did build up, but more than just the running part of it, you've got to do the running, you've got to run. But more than that, you've got to believe in yourself. And I knew that by what I was doing was helping other people. So that belief was always there. I did build up to it, but how do you practice for doing 100 miler? Do you run 100 mile just to convince yourself that you can do it? Or do you do 80 and think, I'll wing the other 20, I'll get there somehow? I don't know. I just done what I thought was right for me.
Yeah. So you're in pretty much the middle of this your latest challenge. What is it that how did this particular challenge come about for you? What was it that made you decide I'm going to go for this one? What kind of spawned the idea, the seed for this one?
In 2017, it would have been my dad's 80th year. He'd have been 80 years old, and it was 20 years since his diagnosis. So I decided 80 and 20, simple maths. It's 100. We'll do 100 marathons in 100 days. I never had any doubt that I wouldn't be able to do it. And I did it. And I raised 120 odd grand, which helped a hell of a lot of people. So then last year, because of COVID, MacMillan celebrated the 110th year. All the major events had been cancelled for fundraising, London Marathon, the MacMillan Coffee Morning, which is always the biggest day of the year for them. And COVID wrecked everything with regards to fundraising. All the charities were on the bones of the bum. The shops were closed. There wasn't an income coming in. So I decided, whilst everybody was in a COVID coma, that I was going to run 110 marathons in 110 days, knowing what the outcome would be. The country was in a dark place when I started on the 1st of February. Everybody was under this dark cloud of COVID, and the restrictions were still in place. I could only run with one other runner. So we talked it through with the family, like I always do. I always get supported through my family. My son was 16, my middle son was 13, he'll have been, and my daughter was only 8 at the time when I set off. And I decided, this is what we're going to do, because I always want to know how it's going to impact on them. I'm still a dad at the end of the day. I still go to work. So does my wife. She works shifts. So I've still got to, whilst I'm doing the running and the fundraising, I've got to think about the other responsibilities that I've got. So we sit down and we discuss it as a family. And my family said to me, Dad, if you're doing it, we're doing it with you. So our Alfie, 16-year-old, he cycled 26.2 mile every single day. He done it on a static bike. He set up his own page and he raised 4.5 grand. And the other two, Bo was 13 and Bo cycled or ran on the treadmill every day. And our Minnie, who was only 8 at the time, she turned 9 on the 15th of May. I finished on the 21st. She cycled every day and done the treadmill as well. So as a family, we were all moving. Yeah. And that enabled me to go to bed at night with a smile on my face, knowing that the children were doing something that was helping me to help other people. Yeah. So I always had that in me. So I'd done the 110. We were successful. We raised over 200 grand. So I knew that the next step would be a completion of a year. You know, it's a circle, isn't it? 365. You start and you go around, and you stop when you get to the end. So I always knew, but I also knew as well that we could change people's perspectives on fitness and get them to take that first step. So I go into a lot of schools and I encourage the children to do something with us, what we do as well. And this was kicked off by my son. There was a lady who lived a couple of doors off us who'd been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that needed treatment in America. There was no treatment in this country. So the community were doing a bit of fundraising. Now, my son, who was 11 at the time, he'd decided when him and Alfie were 10, they said, we're going to do Run January, Dad. We're going to run every single day in January. And I said, do you think you can? And they said, we know we can, and we're going to. So I said, well, that's brilliant. You know, when you've got that mindset that you think you can do something, don't let anybody tell you that you can't. Yeah. They said, we can do it, and we're going to do it. So they set off Run January. They got through it. If one of them struggled, the other pulled them through, and it was vice versa. They never, ever were comfortable together, and it flowed. There was always a little bit of toughness there, but they helped each other, and they showed what team dynamics meant. So they got through January, and our boss said to me, he was 10-year-old at the time, don't forget, he said, Dad, I'm doing the whole year. And I said, you can't, son. I said, it's too difficult. And he said, it isn't, Dad, I'm doing the whole year. So true to his word, he ran the whole of 2018, every single day. He got up in the morning, if I was going afternoon shift, and we set off at 6 o'clock in the morning so they could go to school. We went to on holiday to Crete. He ran in 35 degrees temperature. He raised £35,000 himself, and he said, I'm not finishing, Dad. I said, you are. He said, I want to do 1,000 days. And I said, you can't. You've got to do, you know, you're hitting the same. He said, let me do 500. So we done 500 days, and he raised 35 grand. Then when we found out about our neighbour, he said, I want to do a full marathon. I said, boy, you're 11. He said, I know, but this is what you sort out for me. He said, we'll call it Bo's Alphabet Marathon. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, and there's 26 miles in a marathon. So we'll get people to run a mile with me whose name begins with the letter A. Then we'll do the B's, then we'll do the C's, and so forth. We'll charge them to do it, Dad, say a £5, and then we'll give all the money to Joanne to get her treatment. And he was 11-year-old. And I said, son, if you think you can do that, I'm with you. So he said, well, I know I can. So we went to the local athletic stadium. They agreed that we'll run on the track. I put a thing out on Facebook. There was 250 people turned up. They all left money, and we raised £2,500 that we gave to the family to help them with their cancer battle. So I've got that alphabet marathon into the schools now. So schools are doing stuff like that because ultimately the children are running no more than a mile, but collectively they're running the alphabet marathon, which is fantastic, and they love it. So it's moved on from that. I knew that I could get that into them. I knew that by them combining a little bit of exercise with a little bit of fundraising has a massive impact on people who are really poorly, who need our support and our help. And once you understand, children understand that, and they can do things with a smile on the face, they want to go and do it again. So I've been in lots of schools in West Cumbria. There's lots more schools reaching out to say, can we do this, can we do that? And there's loads of people helping out. The community have pulled together to support me and get behind me. I knew the impact it would have on people. There's people coming to run with me who's previously only done 5 or 6 mile. They're going away after doing a half marathon. Then they're coming back. They're coming back because they know they can push themselves out a little bit further. We often talk when we're running. I have different abilities. It's more of a social run than a race. It certainly isn't a race. We pull people in and we make them enjoy it. Yeah. They enjoy it for themselves, and that gives them the confidence to be able to turn around and come back. Some people who never ever dreamt of doing a marathon are now doing back-to-backs. They're coming and doing one and coming back the following day. And that's massive progress. And I love seeing that. I love seeing people with a smile on the face, people happy and content, mental health, absolutely stress-busting. Running, as I said earlier, I live in West Cumbria, the Lake District. The route that I use, form a cycle path, looks over to the mountains. You can see the sea. We've got it all. Yeah. It changes with the seasons. There's snow on the fells. You know, it's just absolutely fantastic. So I always knew that it was in me to do 365. I'm going to raise £1 million. I know that I will, because after a certain amount of time, I haven't got the platform that celebrities have got or whatever, but it can't be ignored forever. And people will get hold of it and push the word out there, and people will know what I'm doing, and they'll donate towards it. That's what I'm hoping happens. I hope the BBC pick it up a bit better than they have, and they run with it and they show people what is achievable. I'm not a runner, I'm a fundraiser, but I'm a person who can run, and I can show people what can be achieved with a bit of belief.
100%, Gary, 100% indeed. So what's most important to you about what you do? There's lots of different elements in there, but what's the real drivers for you? What's most important to you?
The goal has got to be for me to get to the end. But if you look at what goes on in between, there's lots of different things. And if you're making a cake, you want the right ingredients, you want it to taste good. So for me, for it to taste good, it means getting lots of people involved, getting schools involved, getting people who are joining us who do have mental health issues, who are saying it's better than going to the doctors. It all adds up. The better the ingredient, the better the taste at the end of it. But the driver for me is to be able to raise £1 million to help the 2 charities that I'm raising money for. We've all got a cancer story. There isn't anybody in this country who hasn't got a cancer story, who has been directly impacted on it or indirectly through a friend or a family member or somebody. But every single one of us has got a story, and I just want to be able to reach out and give the support that the charities do through the funding that I can raise for them.
Fantastic. You've done all these challenges and all these fundraising events for so many years now. Is there a memory, a point in time, or a particular challenge, or is there something that's stood out for you as one of your favourite memories, something which kind of really sticks in your mind?
There's 2 things really. There's lots, don't get me wrong, but there's 2 that does really stand out. Last year when we done the 110, my daughter come with us on her 9th birthday, and she was cycling full distance with us, and our little friend was meeting us 7 miles from the end, who was going to join us. She was younger than my daughter, our Minnie, and she was going to join us. So a little way through the run, my son said to me, "Minnie's been crying." And I said, "Why, what's wrong?" And he said, I think she's hurt herself. So when I asked her, "Are you okay?" We pulled her in and I said, "Are you okay?" And she was crying, and somebody had said she'd slipped on the bike and she'd hurt herself. I said, "Oh, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put you to the front and you can lead everybody," because she had previously been at the back, and I can't imagine it being much fun just following. Mm-hmm. So she went to the front and she led us. And then when a friend joined, she said to her, Heidi, when you think about the people who you're doing this for, the pain in your legs goes away." And I thought, how powerful is that from a 9-year-old? She's thinking about the people who are going through a cancer journey, a cancer battle, and suffering. And she's thinking, they're suffering more than me. I'm not going to say this hurts. And I just thought it was, sometimes we need to, as adults, we need to take that mentality on board. And I always think about it, and it does put a lump in my throat to think that I'm being taught by a 9-year-old on how to address things when you think you're having a bit of a bad day. If you think what you're doing it for, the pain in the legs goes away. Very, very powerful. But there was another one. Every single day that my son ran, he ran for 501 consecutive days, and from the age of 10. And every single day that he ran, I used to say a word to him, and it was a Latin word, and he used to give me the meaning of that word. And it was to lift him and to get him going and to keep him focused on the job that he had to do, because at that age, it can be difficult. You've got external influences through school, through just getting older, things happening at home, school work, all that carry on. So every single day, I said to him, "Resurgam," which is Latin, and it translates to, he used to give me the reply, "I shall rise again." But he didn't used to see it. He just used to look at me in the eye and mean it. He used to say, "I shall rise again." So during the year, he won a Pride of Sport award, which is on the same level as the Pride of Britain Awards, only on a sporting theme, obviously. And we went to London to pick up his award, and Trent Alexander-Arnold was supposed to be presenting it to him. But he couldn't come because Liverpool were in the Champions League game and the club wouldn't release him. So they invited us to go to Liverpool to meet his friends. As he said, we'll have a kickabout at Melwood, the training ground, and you can come to Anfield. So we went to Anfield and we went to the press conference. They were playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League. And they done the press conference. Then we went outside and Jurgen Klopp came over and he said, Bo, he said, I think you've done something fantastic. He said, how does a 10-year-old, you're 11 now, Bo, he said, I'm 11 now. He said, how does an 11-year-old manage to do that? How have you got the ability to get up and run every single day? And he said, I do it because my dad says something to me and I give him the meaning. He tells me a word. And Klopp's ears pricked up and he said, what is that? And he said, Dad, see it. So I said to him, Resurgam. And Bo looked at me and he went, I shall rise again. Jurgen Klopp looked at me and he looked at Bo and he said, say that again. So Bo said, Dad. So he said, Resurgam. And he went, I shall rise again. So Klopp said, Jordan. He called Jordan Henderson over and he said, Bo, tell him the story. So Bo told him the story and they were looking at each other and Jurgen Klopp said, that goes in the changing room. That goes in the dressing room, Jordan. And Liverpool won the Champions League that year. But I'm not saying it was because of Bo's little pep talk, but it's not a coincidence. And it's just them little things that do stand out. You know, if I look at him now and I'll go, Resurgam, he stands to attention and he goes, I shall rise again. Yeah. Meaning that he'll get up and he'll do what he needs to do to help other people. And I think that's quite standoutish.
Definitely. Certainly, what you've been able to do there is use words as a trigger to fire off an emotional state. This is one of the techniques that I use to ingrain into athletes, because we have triggers. A trigger can come from anything. It can come from seeing an image. It can come from remembering a memory. It can come from somebody saying something. And obviously, the more you repeat something, the more it ingrains it. So if he's been doing that 501 days, I know, you know, that phrase will be triggered into his mind for the rest of his life, and that'll be a really powerful resource that he can take with him no matter where he is forever.
Absolutely.
We talk about some of your positive memories, your favourite memories, Gary. Has there been a time where, during some of these challenges, where it got tough, where it got dark for you, where things went wrong? And I'm sure it hasn't always been plain sailing for you. Has there been a moment or moments where you've really had to take your own advice in that respect?
I remember when I ran the first time I'd done the 100, it was on day 31 and my wife was night shift. And because I was probably just starting out on doing these big things, and I know I'd run Land's End to John O'Groats a few years before, but my legs were starting to give us a little aches and pains during the night and that. And I'd often get up and go to the bathroom and then get back into bed, shake my legs about and that. And I remember getting into bed and I'd looked at the clock and I think it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I heard my wife coming into the bedroom and I knew straight away that something wasn't right. I could hear her. I knew her presence was in the room and I said, what's wrong? And I could tell she was sobbing. And she said to me, Gavin's died. Gavin was a close friend of ours. He was only 40-year-old, same age as my wife at the time. And I said, no, you're wrong. He hasn't. And she was breaking her heart. She said she'd come home from work and she said, he's died. And it turned out that our friend had died unexpectedly, 40 years old. He was both of our closest friends. And I had a choice to make. I was 31 days into a challenge that was 100 days. And, I remember I went running that day and I ran on my own. I didn't allow anybody to run with me. And I went up until I was in the forest. I'd done a different route just so as I didn't see people. I remember stopping and having to stop quite a lot, and I was crying and I just couldn't believe what was going on. And when I came back, I passed the rugby club where we'd all played rugby, and all the lads, all my friends were going in. And I knew I had to make a decision then. Do I go in and do I go with the lads? I knew if I had that, the challenge was basically over. And I didn't. I resisted going in, and I went home, and I couldn't really look at my wife. It was difficult. But we sat down. I went seeing his wife the next day, and I went seeing his mum and dad, and we had a conversation, and we decided that on day 100, which was going to be the London Marathon for me, that I would run in a vest with his name on the front. And that's what we did. And sometimes you've just got to question, what is difficult and what's impossible. And I found it difficult not to go in that day, to be with my friends, to be around my rugby family. And I knew that if I had the challenge was more or less impossible for me to complete. Grief hits people in different ways, and whilst everybody had got on with what they were doing, but by the time I come to finish, I knew by putting it at the back of my mind and not grieving for my friend that it would come back and bite me, and I wasn't wrong. It was a hard time, and I sat next on the wall with my next door neighbour, who's the coach at the club, and we went through stuff, and it just seemed to me as if I'd been stuck in a bit of a time warp when everybody else had got on with their lives and done their grieving, and I was just starting, and there was nobody there to support me. And you've just got to get on with these things, I suppose. And I didn't really want to bother anybody, and I maybe should have spoke to more people than I did, but I found it really, really difficult. Yeah. That's probably the most difficult time of my life, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, that's probably the most difficult I've ever had.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Gary. Obviously, you had to prioritize what was, you had to prioritize in that moment, didn't you? And we all have those moments in life where we can be conflicted by two different things, and sometimes some things have to let slip in one area of your life in order to go forward in another. But it certainly seems like that was something that you was going through in that moment.
Yeah, definitely.
So this podcast is all about largely about the inner game, the mental, emotional side to performance. How important do you think is the mental side of doing what you're doing? And if you could put a percentage on, obviously going running these marathons is massively physical. It's putting physical stress on your heart, your muscles, your joints, your ligaments, your tendons. There's no taking away from the physical side of taking on any sporting challenge or playing in sport. But what percentage to you it is doing these things mental, and what percentage is it physical, in your opinion?
I think it's whatever you do, is the mental side of it is often a lot larger than the physical side of it, because it's your mind that controls your body. You don't have it. You don't allow it to be the other way. I can get my legs done. You've got to have a positive mindset to be able to do anything, and you've got to always, for me, you've always got to look for the silver lining. You've always got to turn things around to be positive for you. And when I'm running and I see people are struggling, we always get them through. We pull them through. When I was doing 110, there was only 2 of us because of COVID. Cumbrian weather is usually wet and wet and wet. And it was absolutely lashing down one day. And there was rain dropping off the guy who was running with me off his nose, and I started laughing. We were soaked to the skin, the pair of us, and it was cold as well because it was February. And he said, "Why are you laughing?" And I said, "I'll tell you exactly why I'm laughing." I said, "Somebody is going to walk out of a cancer ward today, and they're going to ring the bell, and that's going to signify that they've ended the treatment and that they're cancer-free. If they walk outside today and it's like this, they're going to dance in this rain. They're going to say, this is the nicest rain I have ever seen. And I said, so every time we run and it's raining, we run in somebody else's rain. We run for somebody else to ring that bell. And he went to me, he looked up, he grew 2 foot, and he went, ding, ding, let's go. And we went. So anytime it rains now, and I've seen, it was a few weeks ago, it was a Sunday, and there was a young lad running with his, and I could see he was struggling, and it started raining. And I told him that story. And within 3 minutes, I was trying to catch him. That's how the impact it had on him. So we always look for the silver lining. And I always say, it is mind over matter. Don't let the loud pain in your leg bother you. Think about, and funnily enough, I done a video yesterday with some people who wanted to sponsor the whole day and make a big deal of it. And one of the quotes that I put on from what I'd said, and I didn't even realise I'd said it, was, tell me why I can't do it and I'll tell you why I can. And I didn't even realise that I'd said, and I had to think about what it actually said, because I didn't realise that I'd said that. But I know people will think that I won't do what I'm telling them I'm going to do, but I know people who know me know that it's the only way I know. I don't put a picture on me Strava. I put a number. And the reason I don't do that is because if you leave a thread, people will pull it. And when people who don't believe or think that you're not going to be successful in something, when they say that you're going to be, they'll attack you from another angle. And they'll say, yeah, but look at the state of him. Look at how much weight he's lost. They'll always look for a negative. A negative person will find a negative way. Yeah. And a positive person will find a positive way. Yeah. So I don't leave them threads out for anybody to pull and try and undo what I'm doing. I'll tell people why I will do it. I want to know why they think I can't do it, and I'll tell them why I can. So I think it's more about your mind than your body. I remember there was a young lady got in touch with me, and she said she'd moved to South Africa many years ago, and she'd come back. Our marriage had broke down, and she came back. She was poorly, and she came back. She'd been back 3 years. So I knew her from when we were youngsters, and she said, is anybody massaging you? And I said, no, I'm just doing myself. And I haven't had a pair of hands on me. And she said, come down and I'll massage you, full body massage once a fortnight. And there's no cost. She said, I'll just do that for what you're doing. So I went down, she massaged my legs. She said, I've been in this game for 27 years. She said, I do the PGA Tour in South Africa. She said, I do Diamondback cyclists. And she rounded off all the different people who she'd massaged. And she said, I've never seen a pair of legs like that in my life. She said, there's no need for you to be here, but I love your company, so I'll just massage you. She said, you've got the perfect legs. There's nothing built up in them. There's nothing at all. I can't believe what I am actually doing here. And I had a guy who's part of the Commonwealth movement, and he's been in the Olympics and all that. He's 75 years old, but he still cycles with me. And he says, when I'm running, he says, you've got a perfect footfall. He said, you've balanced on both feet. He said, not a bit of wonder you don't pick injuries up. He said, if you had to teach somebody how to run, they would use the method that you're using there. Wow. And I just find it incredible that, and I find I'm incredibly lucky, but you make luck in life. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, meets opportunity, and you just find that you do the right things. So I do what works for me. I don't change it. I run the same route every day. And people will say, I don't know how you can do that. Well, I do it because it works, and I don't need to change it. I also tell them, well, WD-40 is called WD-40 because it took 40 attempts to get it right. If you got it right the first time, it would be called WD-1. It took 40 attempts. It's right. They don't change it. They're stuck with it because it works. Why do I need to bring difficulties into the routes that I use? I don't. So I keep it simple and I keep it effective for what works.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very, very important what you're saying there. There's sometimes you can overcomplicate things, can't you? And keeping things as simple as possible, no matter whether it's in a challenge like that, whether it's in a sporting context, whether it's in some other area of life. That the simpler that you can keep it, the less moving parts that you've got, the easier it becomes, because the mind works on patterns. It's the mind, the brain is a pattern recognition machine. It will just follow patterns, and as soon as it's learned a pattern, and whether that's a good pattern or a bad pattern, if it's bad patterns can be going drinking too much beer, eating too much food. If it learns a pattern, it's been repeated, it will just get ingrained more and more. But once you've found the efficient patterns, the effective patterns to doing whatever it is that you're doing, then you'd be foolish to change that. Definitely, I couldn't agree with you more, Gary.
It's just routines, and routines are different for everybody because we all operate differently. But we do routine in our life because they work for us. We don't do somebody else's routine because that wouldn't work for us. We do our own. We adapt and develop our own routines.
Yeah, there's quite a famous therapist called Virginia Satir, and she was in a conversation with another psychologist type person, and it was on the discussion, having this discussion about the brain and what its number one function is. And I think this guy's response was that it's to survive. The brain's number one function is to survive. But Virginia Satir said, no, it's not that. It says its number one function is to keep things familiar. And they got in this discussion about how people will die to keep things familiar, will hang, even if they're holding on to things which are negative. They will cling on to these familiar patterns, even if they're destructive. And a lot of what you're doing, obviously, and have done with yourself and what you're doing with other people is helping people break out of their patterns and getting them off the backsides and getting them believing that you can do something different and show them a new pattern, a new way of living their life, a new way of thinking. And one of the best ways of doing that is obviously you showing them that it's possible. But then when you can bring people into these challenges like you are doing, and like you're doing it with children, with adults, you're helping them develop these habits, which you're hoping, I'm sure, that they then stick with it after you've spent some time with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's about. It's about setting them on the path and then letting them run with it themselves, and hoping that they sustain that enjoyment to want to go back to do it again, develop that pattern, embed it, and just hope that they stick with it. Definitely.
You've mentioned that word a few times, Gary, enjoyment, and a big part of what I do with athletes is ensuring that they hold on to that they hold on to enjoyment. And we all start doing these sporting activities, the vast majority of the time anyway, as children. And the thing that brought us to that activity or sport was that we found something that we loved, that we enjoyed doing, that made us happy. We finally found something which we could connect to in some way, which brought us pleasure. And one of the things which happens with some of the athletes I work with is that they start to lose that enjoyment. Too many failures, too many mistakes, or too many bad events, or poor performances, or they've been let down, they've been released from clubs, they've not quite made it. The setbacks have started to take over. The mind has kind of, I look at it like a seesaw. When in the earlier days, their sport and what they're doing was largely about enjoyment, about pleasure. And then as time goes by, these events happen, things occur, these emotional, painful events. And if that tilts the other way, then what they're doing starts to become more about pain than pleasure. And when that balance tips towards pain too much, that's when the performance drops. That's when they stop being able to do the thing that they were so great at. And how do you find enjoyment and pleasure in what you're doing? Because there'll be many people out there who are watching and listening to this, or even coming across your story, will be thinking, that would be torture for me, So how is it that you find pleasure and joy in amongst all what you're doing?
And I think you're right in saying that, when people find out what I'm doing, to sort of make the judgment that it can't be done based on their own performance. because they couldn't do it, other people can't do it. But I say, I've always thought of, I remember back to when I coached youth rugby, and I always thought there was 3 stages of when you're young, you've got to be enjoying things to want to go back. So as a youngster, you just give them a ball and let them run round and come back with a smile on the face and go home and tell their parents how much they enjoyed it and how much they want to go back. As they're getting a little bit older, you put life skills into them to make them better people, and then you start teaching them the skills of the sport, whatever that sport may be. When you get up to adulthood, you'll know how to play the game, whatever it is you're doing, and then you start coaching into people how to win. And when I say win, that can be on an individual level too. So I'm only ever in competition with myself. I want to better me. I want to be able to push myself as far as physically possible. I don't know what that looks like because I've never come to a position where I couldn't do something. I've always gone on and done it. So for me, it's about finding what does make you happy and doing more of it. So when I see people who didn't think that they could run a full marathon and then they go home and they can, that's the enjoyment. When I look at my Just Giving page and say there's £100,000 on it, that's enjoyment. When I see my children going into the gym at home, getting on the bike, doing 10 mile, and then coming in and saying, you haven't given me kudos on Strava yet, I'll say, I didn't know you'd done it. I've done 10 mile. That's enjoyment. When I go to bed, I sleep with a smile on my face. That's because I've enjoyed everything that's gone on. And that's the food for me that keeps me thriving and going again, getting up the next day and going again. And I know that I can do that. I know that there's a load more people going to join me. 3 weeks ago, I had 3 people come from London to West Cumbria to run with me. There's somebody following me on Twitter who's coming over from America to run with me. This is the impact that you can have on people's lives. I do a video in the morning for my social media, Twitter and on Facebook. And I have a vest sponsored, and it's generally in memory of somebody. So I'm not going to let anybody down. My family have sponsored £100 for me to run in a vest in memory of somebody who they're going to think about all day long. And they're thinking that I'm doing them, a service by bringing the memory to the front of the minds, and they can think about it. And it's fantastic. So there's lots of things that I do with a smile on my face. I often say, I encourage my children to speak to everybody who we see on the cycle path, because I'll say to them, that person might not see anybody else today, and you're the only person who might speak to them. So always speak to somebody, be kind, give them a smile. A smile changes the world, and it can change their day. It can change their day for the better. So there's lots of people who come out just to see me running. I know for a fact that there's a guy who comes out every week. Well, it's every fortnight, and he gives me £10 of his pension money, and he says, put that on your page, son. He says, hospice helped my family. And he's very, very proud to stand and wait for me and hand over his pension, £10 of his pension. You're having an impact on people's lives. And if that doesn't make people proud and happy to sustain what I'm doing and continue to do what I do, that's why I do it. I've done some stats for a lady at work a couple of days ago for a team. They were doing an event, and she wanted me to put the stats together of what I've done. And right at the end, I'd said how many calories I'd burned, how many miles I'd run this year, how many pairs of shoes I'm going through, lots of different things. But I also said from the 1st of January till present day, there's been 138,000 people diagnosed with cancer. And that's 138,000 reasons for me to carry on running. And that's what I do. And I do that with a smile on my face, knowing that I can. I pass people who's quite elderly, who's probably ran for the last time. And you never know when you've done something for the last time. So there's a sad aspect to that. I never want to stop helping people. That's what I do. I help people. And that's not just with the money that we raise. It's with putting a smile on the face by them seeing me, doing what I do. Sometimes people live their lives through your eyes, and they want to be with you. They want to do what you're doing. You give them that little lift that, carries them through the day. A lot of people live on their own, and they just come out and they just want to see you to give them that little lift to get through the day. So it makes me happy doing what I do. And the people around the areas that I live in are proud of me, and they're proud, and I like the thought of that. I like the thought that my dad would be proud of what I've done, and my mum was, and I know that they would be, because I'm proud of what I see my children doing. I've shaped them into good people, and that's what keeps me going every single day.
Yeah, and that this certainly shines through with everything that you're saying, Gary. And I think what happens, unfortunately, at times for people is that all of these things that you're thinking about, which bring joy and fulfillment to what you're doing, you're able to keep clear pictures of them in your mind, reminding yourself, this is why I'm doing this today. And it probably stops those what could have been lower moments. And if at any point you may be getting a little bit fatigued or whatever, you're able to think of why you're doing it. And again, it's something that I encourage with the people who I work with, that it's easy for the mind to look for the negative, because that's how the mind is conditioned. Unfortunately, this brain of ours, this body of ours, a long, long time ago, wasn't living in the safe world that we are. It was, filled with far more danger and uncertainty than what we're in, and that mechanism is stayed in us. There's always a part of the mind that's looking out for danger, so that it can respond if needed to. And unfortunately, with some people, that mechanism can turn on and it doesn't turn off, and unfortunately, it kind of filters their mind to keep looking for the negative, keep looking for what's wrong, keep looking for the things that they don't have in life. And as a result of that they're the pictures that they're seeing in their mind. They're looking for what's wrong. They're looking for what they don't have. They're thinking about all the things that did go wrong or could go wrong. And a big part of what I do is flipping all that around, reversing it around, so that people start getting their minds and bodies to go in a new direction, focusing on their goals, what they want to be, even if they're not that person now. Who do they want to be in the future? Why are they doing it? And it certainly seems that you've been able to get your mind and condition your mind to just be really clear on what you're doing, and that really sounds like that it helps motivate you and drives you to just keep going.
So I explain that to people as there's lots of different variants as to why you feel fatigued or whatever it might be, and I always say to people, if they're struggling, when they're struggling, and I can notice it before they tend to, they might drop back, or you get this, you see the signs, and I'll stop with them and I'll say to them, right, I'm going to explain something to you now that I want you to understand. And I always say to them that within you, there is two dogs. There's the good dog and there's the bad dog. The good dog will tell you how far you've came. It won't look to see how far you've got left. It'll tell you how many people you're helping. It'll tell you the reason why you're here. And it'll tell you how good you are and how you're inspiring other people around you. The bad dog will just reverse all that. It'll tell you, what is the point? What's the point going on any further? You're not helping yourself and you're not helping anybody else. And it'll beat you up and it'll bite you if you let it. And I'll ask them, which dog's going to win? And then before they answer me, I'll tell them, the dog that wins is the dog that you feed. So starve that bad dog and let's get on with it. And when people understand that themselves and they know that the bad dog's starting to bite them, they understand it. And they'll say, I'm not going to let this happen. I'm not going to let that happen at all. Why am I even thinking of letting these thoughts creep into my mind? And the positive comes out and the push on. And that's sometimes what you've got to do. You've got to realise, I'm not letting that bad dog in.
Exactly. And that's why this podcast is called The Inner Game. There's this game going on in between your ears, and it will convince you of various different things, or try to. It can convince you of all the amazing things which are out there and possible in this world, and it can also convince you, as we were talking about there, of all the things that could go wrong, that are bad in the world. And the great people in life, whether it's in sport, whether it's just in day-to-day life as a parent, whether it's in business, in whatever facet, they win this game. They don't let, in your terms, that bad dog keep barking. They find a way of stopping the bark of that bad dog and raising the volume of the good dog, so that they keep moving forwards. And that's certainly what you're doing, Gary.
Yeah.
I know we've mentioned this before, but I think it is really important to talk about it. How important is belief? Because this is something that I've studied a lot over the years, the power of belief and what actually is a belief. Most people talk about beliefs, but many people don't know what they are, how the mind constructs them, how they are created. And there's a really powerful book. I don't know if you've read it, and if you haven't, I think you would find it very interesting. It's called You Are the Placebo, and it's a book all about belief and the neurology and the science of belief, and it's filled with all sorts of different stories and case studies about people who've overcome illnesses, diseases, and this guy spent time studying people who were given, what's the word I'm looking for? Can't quite find it, but essentially they've been given, a terminal diagnosis, and yet they didn't die. And he studied all the people that were given who were given a terminal diagnosis, and then they had a spontaneous reversal of it. And this book is all about how these people are doing something different with the mind. So how important is belief, do you think, in what you're doing and in day-to-day life?
I think it's massively important, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, do people understand what belief is? What is belief to people? Is it perception of whatever they're sold? What if I was to say to somebody, what is paradise? They would tell me it's probably something like a golden beach with palm trees and cocktails. But paradise for me is where I run. Paradise is seeing people smiling and being happy. They've been sold that by a travel company. That's what paradise is. It's whatever you want to make it. And it's like the person who believes you can and the person who believes you can't are both right. But it's having that conviction that you want to do something and the reasons behind you want to do it, to find a way to do it and believe that you can do something. So belief to me is 90%, maybe even more, of success. You've got to have the belief. And if somebody, when you're chosen to do a job, it's because somebody believes in you. Somebody believes you're good enough to do it. If then you start to have second thoughts about why you can't do it, somebody's saying something in you to convince themselves that you're worthy. You need to start convincing yourself that you're worthy, and you need to believe in yourself a bit more. You need to have that belief to be successful, because without it, you're not going to get there.
No, definitely. I think it was Carl Lewis who said something like, without belief or confidence in yourself, you're always going to find a reason, to fail. You're always going to find a reason to quit. You're always going to find a reason to pull out of something. And essentially, beliefs are made on our memories. And often people's beliefs have come from something which has happened somewhere in their past. And that could have been something which happened in their childhood. This one memory, this event that happened a long time ago that their mind has held on to. And yet often that memory, this thing which is anchoring them to this lack of belief in themselves, often is so untrue. And when you start to unpick that and unpack that, often people even can't believe once you've taken them to that point that they ever even believe that about themselves. And beliefs are created, as I said, in one or two ways. It's either often one event, or sometimes it's the stacking up of smaller, less emotional events. And one of the ways of reversing that is start focusing on the opposite, thinking of all the other times when you have achieved something, when you have done something great. And if somebody has a lack of belief in themselves, a self-worth issue, those beliefs become like magnets. The mind starts to look for all the evidence that supports that belief. So somebody's saying, I can't do something, I'm not smart, I'm not intelligent, I'm not fit. That belief then attracts their mind to focus on all the evidence which supports that they're not that. And people need to reverse that by focusing on the information that they do have that is counter to that. And there will always be examples of somebody showing the qualities that they don't have. It's just about becoming more self-aware of yourself and your own resources that everybody has.
Yeah. I think it can also be described, belief, as a coping mechanism as well. You know, we believe something because we want to, because it makes it easier for us to think that.
Well, yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think you know, if we think of death and we think, well, you go to heaven, but has anybody ever came back and said, heaven, what a great place it is, that heaven? It's absolutely fantastic. People think you go there because it's a nice place and it's the next step in your life. But where's the proof of it? And I'm a Roman Catholic, I go to church, but where is the proof? Yeah. You know, it's a coping mechanism for death. Yeah, you're going on to the next stage of your life, but nobody's ever come back and said, fantastic up there or down there or over there. Guess who we're saying? You know, it's great. The beer all day long, you don't even get a hangover. It's fantastic. I can't wait till you get away. You know, you don't get, but you put this belief in your head that there is an afterlife and that it's going to be all milk and honey and it's all going to be great. And I think that is to deal with death.
In what way is it? Do you think it's the deal with death?
I think it makes it easier for people who don't want to face death. You know, so when they do die, they're going to a better place than here. Yeah. You know, the belief is that there's something else for them. But what is the reality? Has anybody ever came back and said this exists at all?
I think I'm not a religious person. I used to be when I was much younger. I spent a lot of time thinking about that, you know, thinking about the things that you're talking about. And I don't want to offend people who are religious and believe.
No, me neither. And I was having that conversation with somebody the other day. You know, I don't want to offend anybody, but we believe in what we're told to believe in. And it got back to the crack with Russia. You know, they're watching the television that the state are allowing them to watch, and they believe in it. They believe in things to be true because that's what we do. We believe what we're told.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that all starts at such a young age. It all starts in schools. People are conditioned to believe authority figures, and you know, when you look back at why schools were even created, the first schools were created by the churches because they wanted to train up the next priests. So they would get the children, bring them into a mini school, train them up, and that's how you continue the lineage of the story of whatever it is. And if as a child you were told by multiple authority figures in something, just like Father Christmas,
yes, absolutely.
You can convince, if you get somebody early enough, you can convince them of anything. And I think one of, in my opinion, one of the flaws which arises as a result of believing in life after being on this earth is that it stops people appreciating that their time on earth. Because I personally believe that heaven is on earth, paradise is here, and if people are waking up each day thinking that when they're gone, that's the better place to be, that's pulling them out of snapping out of, as you said at the start, that whatever coma they're in, and that's holding them back, because you only get one physical life, that's for sure. You're only going to get one chance walking on this earth, and people waste their time, they waste their energy thinking negative things, taking part in negative physical habits. And I do find it such a shame, you know, people who I come across, people who I work with, sometimes I just want to grab hold of them and shake them and, you know, snap them out of it, because as I said, we've only got one crack at this, and I intend on giving it the best shot I have got. That's for sure. I can certainly sense that about you, Gary.
Absolutely.
Got last two questions for you then. You've mentioned something quite a few minutes ago which stuck in my mind, and I set myself a challenge some time ago. I was inspired. I also work as a PE teacher in a school. I've worked in schools for 20 years, and early in my career, there was a man called Les Darcy who came in doing a table tennis club after school, and I was seeing him play these the kids that were there, and then in the end I went over and we'd have a little rally, and then all of a sudden this ball had whizzed past me, and I was like, what the hell's just happened there? I better like sharpen up here. So I'd start trying to play a bit harder, bang, ball would fly past me, like, flipping it. And again and again and again. I was like, God almighty. And this guy was like 80. And it got to the end of it, and the session finished. I was like, Lex, like, what's going on here? He said, don't take that too personally. He said, I've whooped far lesser people than you. He said, I'm actually a world champion table tennis player. I was like, you're joking? He said, yeah. He said, I'm a world champion at the over 80s. I said, right, gosh. And I got this conversation with him, and it also turns out he was a world champion weightlifter. And his mentality, I was about 23 at the time, something like that, and it really stuck in my mind how he was. And I remember one of the things that he said was that I just never stopped. I never stopped in my life. You know, I was doing these things from a younger age, and I just never stopped doing what I was doing. And he says, often I turn up to these tournaments, and quite often people are on Zimmer frames and things like this, and I'm beating people just because I can move more freely than them. And then I remember about 2 or 3 years after that, I hadn't seen him for a while, and he says, I said, how's things going, Les? He says, great. He says, I've taken up a new sport. I says, what? He says, I was pole vaulting yesterday. I've taken up the decathlon. I said, God almighty. And the reason why I'm saying this is because after meeting him, I set myself a challenge of when I get to 100, it's my goal I want to be able to run and sprint the 100-meter race. There's a race that goes on where you have to be 100 to be in, and you run that race. And I've set myself that challenge, knowing that the only way that I'm going to get there is if I keep pushing my boundaries. And I'm just curious to know as to what your opinion is on the limits of the human mind and human performance, and your limits, if there are any.
Well, that's it. I honestly don't know what my limits are. Before I ran the 100 marathons in 100 days, 2017, I'd done that. So 2016, I remember it was Christmas time, and we'd had friends here, and we went into the new year, and it's always a bit of a flat time after New Year. And the wife had said to me, what's wrong with you? And I said, I just feel a bit rubbish, you know. And she said, oh, why don't you go for a run and come back and tell us what your next challenge is going to be, what you're going to do. I said, I'll do that. So I went out and I went running up Ennerdale, and I came back, and she said, well, you've got a smile on your face, so you know you're doing something. I said, I'm going to run the coast to coast. She went, spot on. When? I said, Tuesday. And I think it was Saturday morning then. And she said, all right, so this is in January. The coast to coast goes from St. Bees on the west to Robin Hood's Bay on the east, 192 miles. She said, how long will that take you? I said, well, I don't know. I'll just put a backpack on and I'll do it unsupported. So that's what I done in January, and I was the first coast to coast through, because normally it sets off in April or something. And I was setting off when it was dark in the morning, and I was finishing when it was dark at night. And I'd done it over 4.5 days. But I remember going into Richmond, and I had a pair of Gore-Tex shoes on, and I'd got my feet wet. The snow on the fells was about 4 foot deep, and it took me an hour to walk a mile. I couldn't run through it. It took me an hour. Nobody does the coast to coast in January. Nobody, ever. So I'd got my feet wet and I'd blistered up. I never get blisters. There were blood blisters. My toenail come off. My feet were an absolute mess. I remember walking out of Richmond, across the cobbles, and I was in agony, absolute agony. And I wouldn't give up. I'd got so far and it was absolutely lashing down. The weather was horrendous. And a car stopped and he said, "Would you like a lift?" And it was I think it was a Lexus. And the guy was dressed really smart. He had a suit on and an overcoat. And I thought, I can't get in his car like this. And I can't get in his car because that would be cheating anyway. And I said, "No." I said, "You're all right. I've got a challenge that I'm doing and it forbids me to get in a car." He went, "Well, the offer's there." I said, "No, I'm fine." And I shut the door and he went. And about 5 minutes later, my feet were killing me. And I thought, if anything stops here, I'm getting in it. I'd broke myself. And I sat down and I cried. And I thought, that's it. I've come to my limit. That's what I've done. But then I stood up and I carried on. And I thought, if anybody's going to break me, it's got to be me. Nobody else can do that to me. It's got to be me. And I put myself to a point where I thought there was no return. I can't go on any further. That's what I actually thought in my head till I got back up. And I carried on and I went and I finished it in 4.5 days. Over mountains, in terrible conditions. And when my wife come to pick me up, she had to bring flip-flops because I couldn't get my feet into shoes. They were almost double the size of my feet. And it was my mind that was telling me to go on. My body was telling me, "You've had enough." But it was my mind that was saying, "Just keep going." And there was nothing at stake apart from the fact that I would have known I'd failed if I hadn't got to the other side. And I was pleased when I did get finished. I knew that whatever else was thrown at me, it wouldn't beat me. And I knew that you can throw the kitchen sink at me if you want, but if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if it means getting on my belly and crawling, then, that's an option. But the human mind is a phenomenal piece of kit. It's it can do whatever you allow it to do.
Yeah.
And the red signs aren't stop signs. They're just little warnings to say something isn't quite right here. And then you reassess, you address it, and you crack on, you get on with it. You dress your wounds when you finish. And you can't dress your mind. You can only wish you'd pushed on, because most people who stop just wish that they'd pushed on that little bit further.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be wishing I'd pushed any further. I'm going to get to the end.
Awesome, Gary. My last question for you. The name of the business is The Sporting Excellence. This podcast is all about trying to achieve excellence in life. And I ask everybody the same question. What's your definition of sporting excellence or excellence? What does excellence mean to you?
I think it depends what you want out of life. You can perform perfection. Do you want perfection? Or do you want results? Do you want you can win ugly? It's a win at the end of the day. Excellence, like probably achieving something that you didn't think was achievable for you. We see some remarkable athletes in the world and we wonder how they can be doing what they do. You've got a gift. Most of them are gifted. Some of them don't have to work hard to just turn on the gift. Sporting excellence for me is finding a way. There's always a way. And if you find that way, you'll achieve your sporting excellence or just excellence in life. I'm never in competition with anybody other than me. And I always want to beat myself. I want to get over the line. I want to do things that I'm telling people I'm going to do. I'm not going to let people down. I'm a man of my word. Excellence to me is delivering on your word.
Fantastic. That's a fantastic answer, Gary. And it's a fantastic way of ending this podcast. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and sharing with people, insights to you, your life, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and listening to everything that you've been saying here. It's so inspiring for myself, for other people. certainly someone, a PE teacher who's worked in the world of sport for a long time. I just want to thank you again for what you do for people, not just the people who you're trying to help, who are struggling with cancer, but it certainly seems that intertwined with this mission of yours is also about inspiring day-to-day people, getting people going again, helping people turn their lives around, making people believe, things that they didn't once think were possible. And I think it's absolutely magnificent what you're doing, Gary. And I wish you all the best with this challenge. I know you'll get it done, and I know probably not long after getting it done, it won't be too long before you're thinking of something else. So it's been a real pleasure, Gary. Thank you very much for coming on and giving me your time.
No bother. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks, Gary.
The Inner Game Podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now